U.S. President Donald Trump dismisses allegations over Russia as conspiracy theories. Could a possible independent probe spell trouble for his administration? South Africa's ruling African National Congress calls for tough sanctions against local and foreign banks accused of rigging the rand currency. And speaking exclusively to VOA, Melinda Gates talks about her mission to promote women's health. Africa 54 starts right now.
Good evening and welcome. I'm Vincent Makori. This is Africa 54. U.S. President Donald Trump is dismissing allegations that his close associates and campaign advisors have had close ties with Russia. He defended his ousted National Security Advisor Mike Flynn Wednesday, blaming the controversy over Flynn's contacts with Russian officials on what he called illegally leaked information. VOA's Larissa Hoke has our report.
President Trump on Wednesday blamed the media and the intelligence community for Flynn's downfall.
I think it's very, very unfair what's happened to General Flynn, the way he was treated, and the documents and papers that were illegally, I stress that, illegally leaked. Very, very unfair.
The administration also has to deal with new reports of wiretaps, purportedly revealing multiple contacts between Trump's campaign officials and the Kremlin. Russian presidential spokesman Dmitry Peskov denied that such talks took place.
These are just newspaper reports that are not based on any facts, do not point to actual facts.
Republicans and Democrats have agreed to a congressional probe into Russia's involvement in the U.S. presidential election and the content of talks between U.S. and Russian officials. But Republican lawmakers will make sure the probe does not hurt the president, says political analyst Klaus Lares. Lares says an independent bipartisan commission would have more power to conduct a thorough investigation.
An independent commission has entirely different powers and is, of course, much more dangerous to President Trump. And an independent commission is what reminds us of President Nixon and the Watergate scandal.
Also Wednesday, a White House official accused Moscow of violating a missile treaty, which many see as Russia's testing of Trump's mettle. Lares says that such conclusions are premature.
Trump is right in one point that we need to engage with Russia and with President Putin. But it depends how we engage with Putin and what price the United States is ready to pay for that engagement.
U.S. and Russian officials are meeting face-to-face Thursday for the first time since President Trump took office. Larissa Hoke, VOA News, Washington.
Well, fast food executive Andrew Pursdale, President Trump's nominee for Labor Secretary, withdrew his name from consideration Wednesday evening, just one day before his scheduled confirmation hearing. White House spokesman Sean Spicer confirmed Pursdale's withdrawal. He is the first Trump nominee to withdraw from consideration after support for his nomination eroded in the Senate. Pursdale has been at the center of a series of controversies, among them his failure to pay 5 years' worth of taxes on a former housekeeper who was not eligible to work in the United States. The discrepancy posed political problems for Republicans who have taken a hard line on immigration and taxes. Now, activists in the United States are calling on immigrants to protest President Donald Trump's tough stance on immigration by staying home from work or school on Thursday and not shopping or eating out. The effort is aimed at highlighting the vital role of the immigrants play in American society. Now, the so-called A Day Without Immigrants is largely being driven by word of mouth on social media, and it arose in response to the president's vows to crack down on illegal immigration and his executive order. The order to temporarily block entry to people from 7 Muslim-majority countries has since been suspended by a federal judge. Well, Republicans took their first step towards keeping a campaign promise of repealing and replacing the Affordable Care Act, more commonly known as Obamacare. The health insurance program championed by President Barack Obama was criticized as too expensive with too many regulations. Many Americans are worried whether the new plan will cover pre-existing conditions, something many private health insurance plans do not cover. Here's VOA's Caroline Trisuti.
A store closed, a life career gone.
Working 12 to 14 hours every day, doing whatever you have to to pay the bills and make it work.
Bobby closed his Kansas furniture store after he couldn't pay thousands of dollars for health insurance for him and his employees.
This was my dream, and it disappeared in a few years.
Bobby now spends a lot of time at home.
How are you guys doing?
He's unemployed.
Come see Bella.
And gets his health insurance through the Affordable Care Act, or ACA, passed under President Barack Obama. It's keeping him alive.
My prescription cost is about $2,500 a month to get filled.
Bobby worries that replacement plans proposed by Congress will end the program or remove its prescription coverage or the mandate to cover pre-existing conditions.
Obama has said that his health care plan is not perfect. It could use some changes, but not do away with it.
How many do I have today?
Dr. Donna Sweet's specialty is HIV care. She's a legend, working in the field since AIDS was discovered. She says ending the ACA would take the disease back decades.
Especially if we lose ACA, it's right back to people dying if they can't get their medicines.
Dr. Sweet says that would lead to a public health disaster.
There's a 96% reduction in transmission when the person who's infected is on medicine.
The ACA has had its problems. Mercy Medical Center in Independence, Kansas, used to look like this. Now half of it is torn down. The hospital closed because of financial issues, in part because of the ACA's low reimbursement rate. But Mercy isn't alone. 80 rural hospitals have closed since 2010, the year the Affordable Care Act went into effect.
What we're looking for.
Dr. Greg Hennon runs a mental health clinic 5 minutes away.
I don't see a hospital ever coming back to Independence, Kansas.
Without nearby hospitals, ACA patients must rely on specific clinics, which are difficult to find in some rural areas. Cindy Williams' husband lost his job a year ago. She hopes Congress keeps the Affordable Care Act affordable.
We've saved money over the years, so we have a little backup, but a lot of people don't have that little backup.
20 million Americans are covered by the ACA. Its repeal is a priority of the new administration, but coming up with a replacement may take a while. In Kansas, Carolyn Presutti, VOA News.
Well, South Africa's President Jacob Zuma told Parliament on Thursday the government would come down hard on the local banks accused in a report by the competition watchdog of rigging the rand currency. The Competition Commission says it has found the banks, including U.S., European, Japanese and Australian lenders, had colluded to coordinate their trading activities when dealing in the rand and U.S. dollar. The Commission, which has been conducting an investigation since April 2015, recommended heavy fines be imposed on the lenders. The ruling ANC party attacked the banks, which many South Africans view as a symbol of the stark racial inequality that persists 23 years after the fall of apartheid. Now, for more on the currency situation in South Africa, joining us by phone is Mielani Mkabela. He's an economic analyst and executive director of the Pan-African Business Forum. Mielani, welcome to Africa 54.
Thanks, and the viewers.
Yes, now first, just run us through this. How exactly was this being done by all these many banks?
When you look on the financial situation of the banking industry of South Africa, you will understand that there are international licenses that you will need to have when you are practicing or when you are doing the currency switches with American, with the US dollar and with the euro or the GBP. So you will find South African banks depending on American banks for their primary license to trade on certain currencies, and as well the European banks to trade on certain currencies. And then in the instance, the Barclays situations of probably acquiring ABSA, it was a strategic move because Barclays had a lot of licenses that could assist ABSA to reduce the cost in operating the international banking market. So you will then find a lot of intervention from global banks being participated in such a collusion because of the interconnectedness of
all this
currencies that the South African market will have to play on.
Now, how has this impacted the ordinary South Africans who probably may not even understand the intricacies involved in rigging the currency?
I would say from the impact to the country, it will be huge, because then now you will look on the ethicalness of banks and the integrity of banks from country point of view. When you look on the global competitiveness report of the World Economic Forum, you will find that South Africa is commended for its financial services mainly, and we have the Doing Business Global of the World Bank commending our financial systems and governance in financial systems. And when you find two major banks, which is ABSA and Standard Bank, being involved in such a currency collusion, it has an impact in doing business in South Africa. And at the same time, investors will start to have a different eye, because when they come to the country, they will have to work with Standard Bank or they will have to work with ABSA as the major banks. So that causes concern on ethicalness and integrity, because multinationals will need to hold an account with a local bank. But when you look on the other part, the opposing view, it will be on the general public, it has impacted a lot, because you will find our prices have been high, and even though we have been questioning the issue of the rent for almost 5 years, but no one was attending to that, mainly when you look on the Reserve Bank and you look as well on our domestic treasury.
Thank you, and very disturbing knowing that there was another scandal like this a few years ago. Mielani, we do appreciate your insights, and we'll follow up on this issue in the coming days. Mielani Mkabela is an economic analyst and executive director of the Pan-African Business Forum. Not too far from South Africa, Zimbabwe's worst drought in 25 years has left more than 4 million people needing food aid during the peak of the lean season, which usually runs from January to the end of March. The 2016 drought, which also withered crops in other southern African countries, has been particularly bad in Zimbabwe, as severe cash shortages have caused widespread food shortfalls and fueled anti-government protests. The United Nations Food Agency on Thursday said Zimbabwe is likely to be the hardest hit country from an outbreak of armyworms that is destroying crops and threatening food security in southern Africa. The UN's Food and Agriculture Organization said in a statement up to 130,000 hectares of maize and corn crops could be hit in Zimbabwe, compared to a reported 90,000 hectares in Zambia and 50,000 hectares in Namibia. Well, the government of Burundi says it will not attend peace talks scheduled to resume in Tanzania on Thursday. Now, the discussions are aimed at finding an end to a violent political crisis that began in 2015 after President Pierre Nkurunziza announced he would seek a third term, a move opponents say violated the constitution and a peace deal that ended an ethnically charged civil war. A government spokesman says the government objected to the presence of a senior UN advisor, Ben Omar Jamal, at the talks, but did not say why. The government has repeatedly accused the United Nations of bias against it after several human rights groups have said the security forces and ruling party have committed abuses. The main opposition group, Scanred, said it would attend the talks. Well, we want to know what you think about Africa 54 and the stories we cover, so join the conversation on Facebook. The address is Africa 54. We are also streaming our show live on Facebook, so check us out and share our show with your friends. And also check out our headlines 24/7 on voaafrica.com. Find me on Twitter at VOA Vince Makori. Coming up, Melinda Gates tells us why women's health is key for global development. Stay with us.
This is BizBeat.
Britain's National Health Service, the NHS, is undergoing some changes that will affect how patients pay for service. For UK citizens, healthcare remains free, but visitors can expect to start paying up front for their healthcare needs. Professor Joseph Marion Thomas is a consultant oncologist.
We don't want overseas visitors who are not entitled to NHS care in the NHS, where they're taking up capacity which is already in short supply, and we know that most of them don't pay anyway.
Hospitals and doctors will have to determine if a patient is a citizen and then report that information to the NHS. Shayamantha Asakan with charity Doctors of the World says doctors don't want to be border guards, so to speak.
It's just creating more work for NHS staff at a time when they're already incredibly overstretched.
Asylum seekers and refugees will continue getting care, but the new non-resident paying policy goes into effect in April. For VOA's BizBeat, I'm Philip Alexio.
I'm Bill Arcega. I'm the host of VOA's The Correspondents, a roundup of the world's top stories with analysis from our dedicated reporters. It's really a conversation the same way that you would bring a friend to your home and ask them what's going on. And our correspondents will do that and answer those questions through their own eyes.
That appears a false choice in more ways than one.
We can't actually put you there, but we can come pretty close. In 30 minutes, we'll show you the world.
Well, it's time for our health report. Joining us now is Africa 54 health correspondent Lino Madu with part 2 of our exclusive interview with Melinda Gates, a co-founder of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Lino.
Thanks, Vincent. Melinda Gates elaborates on some of the progress made in women's health, including more access to reproductive health tools for women around the world.
Well, for the first time in history, there are 300 million women in developing countries on contraceptives. We've never had that before. Now, there's a global goal to get 120 million women voluntary access to contraceptives by the year 2020. And so the right groundwork is being laid for that. That is, governments are looking at their supply chain issues and saying, okay, do we have, all the tools that a woman might want, whether it's a long-acting tool or a short-acting contraceptive? Have we fixed the supply chain so that contraceptives are not just in the capital city, but out in the remote rural areas? Are we making sure we have the right policies so that, the newer tools that have come along that are easier to use and have fewer side effects, women have access? And lastly, are we doing the cultural piece to educate men and women and even the religious leaders of why contraceptives actually make healthier families? And so I'm seeing countries take all of those steps. It's taking some time. Different countries are further ahead in different pieces of that, but I'm very encouraged by the groundwork that's being laid.
How do you think that men can be part of the solution when it comes to addressing the issue of contraceptives?
What we're seeing is that the men will buy into the idea of contraceptives when they understand that their children will be healthier. If you say to a man, we know that your child is 35% more likely to make it to their first birthday if the spacing has been by 3 years, and twice as likely to make it to their 5th birthday. Most dads that I have met all over the world are interested in having healthy children. We also talk to them about the fact that their wife will be healthier. And again, we know from great studies that if those births are spaced, the family is ultimately wealthier. And so when men start to understand that, why that spacing is so important and so beneficial, then they start to buy in. But again, you have to talk to them in ways that are interesting and understandable to them, and that has to be done in the right cultural context, which is different in different countries in Africa.
Now, there's a saying that a healthy baby starts with a healthy mother. Is this why women's health is so important to you as well?
Absolutely. So we know that if a child is, for instance, fed properly in what we call their first 1,000 days of life, which actually means at the start of conception, all the way through the pregnancy, so the mom being fed properly and then the child being fed properly, it means that that child can grow up to reach their full potential, both cognitively and developmentally. And I think Bill and I believe that every child in the world should have the chance at a healthy start and a chance to lead a life that leads to their full potential.
Some people say that women have come a long way around the world economically and socially. One example is when we look at the MDGs, the literacy rate has improved globally from 83% to 91% between 1990 and 2015, and the gap between women and men has narrowed among youth aged 15 to 24. How do you assess the status of women and girls, particularly in Africa?
Well, I would say that women and girls, we are absolutely making progress. The statistics that you just cited are right. I think we need to accelerate that progress. We need to intensify it, and we need to accelerate it. There is not yet parity for women in any country around the world, including my own. And until we reach parity on everything, we are not there yet. So I think continuing to make investments on behalf of women, making sure in particular in some African countries, despite the statistics getting better, they're absolutely better at the primary level. And as you pointed out, they're getting better at the secondary level. But there are still many places where a girl is pulled out of school early and she doesn't actually get to complete secondary school. And a quality education is incredibly important to everything we're discussing. If a girl or a boy doesn't have a quality education, they don't have the chance to go on to university if that's their dream. So we need to continue to make those investments on behalf of both boys and girls and to do it equally.
You spoke about lack of parity. The SDG 5 aims at achieving gender equality and empowering all women and girls by 2030. Is this a realistic goal? How can we make sustainable progress within the next decade?
Well, we need to keep making the investments that we are making on behalf of women and girls. We need to look at where they're being held back. We need to look at where we need to invest more in their health. For instance, HIV/AIDS. Predominantly hits women in the 15 to 24 age cohort. That is a really important time in a young woman's life. So we need to make the investments in HIV/AIDS there. We need to make the investments in HPV, which is the vaccine on cervical cancer. So we have to make investments in women's health. We have to make investments in making sure they have a quality education, that they're kept in school, and we need to make sure that they have economic opportunity. If we do those things, women will have the chance to reach their full potential. But that's a substantial agenda between now and 2030, and one that, development partners and governments really need to tackle head on and take on those various pieces.
And that's our health report for today. To stay in touch, find me on Twitter at Linor Moudou. Vincent?
Great report there, Lenore. Thank you very much. And I'll be sure to watch Lenore Moudou's health report every Tuesday and Thursday right here on Africa 54. Well, it's time now for a short break. Still to come on Africa 54, remembering John Brown's Day of Reckoning. We'll show you the man and the story behind a daring mission to end slavery in America. We'll be right back.
Et la violence dans les provinces.
Moi, personnellement, j'ai mon sentiment sur ça.
Death and life.
Well, it's been more than 150 years since the American Civil War ended and slavery was officially abolished. Now, there is a renewed interest in the life of a man who, before the outbreak of war, believed armed insurrection was the only way to overthrow the institution of slavery in America. Viewers Chris Simpkins traveled to Harper's Ferry, West Virginia, where abolitionist John Brown launched his daring plan to end one of the darkest chapters in American history.
On these hallowed grounds where men died, John Brown led a group which in 1859
took control of the U.S. Army's arsenal in Harper's Ferry, West Virginia.
John Brown's a very frustrated American. He was so angry, in fact, that he determined that the only way to remove slavery from the country was through violent overthrow of the institution, to literally eliminate it through war.
Brown and his men planned to steal 100,000 rifles from the U.S. government's armory and distribute them to thousands of black slaves and white abolitionist fighters in an effort to overthrow the government. At the time, slavery was legal in parts of the United States. Dennis Fry, chief historian at the Harper's Ferry National Historical Park, says John Brown wanted his army to orchestrate a huge migration of slaves from southern plantations.
So the plan is this: provide them with armed protection as they migrate north to the Promised Land, to the land of freedom, to the ground north of the Mason-Dixon line, where they would be free.
36 hours after John Brown captured the armory here in Harper's Ferry, he was surrounded by Marines at the armory's fire engine house. Soon after that, he was captured
alive, captured by the Marines, dragged out of the engine house, taken to nearby Charlestown, the county seat of Jefferson County, Virginia, placed on trial. A jury, all white, of course, and all male, will find Brown guilty of murder, treason, and inciting rebellion. Only 6 short weeks after his capture, Brown will be executed, December 2nd, 1859.
Debate still rages over John Brown's legacy, 158 years after his death.
Some believe he's a tyrant, and even use the word terrorist. Conversely, others say, no, he is a freedom fighter. He is a martyr. He is a hero. Who is he?
Former slave and renowned abolitionist Frederick Douglass was a friend of John Brown, but did not join him on the raid. Dennis Fry says years after Brown's execution, Douglass believed his actions were a success.
Douglass would firmly state that John Brown had commenced the Civil War, that Brown was responsible for starting the war that brought the ultimate end to the greatest stain in American history, the enslavement of human beings.
Chris Simpkins, VOA News, Harper's Ferry, West Virginia.
And that's our show for today. Now be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. For more news, tune in to VOA's evening radio show Africa News Tonight at 1800 UTC, and in the mornings to Daybreak Africa between 0300 and 0600 UTC, Monday through Friday. Thanks a lot for watching from all of us here in Washington. Have a good night.
Welcome to the Voice of America's Newswords.
Today's word is important in the debate about technology that hides data, even from government investigators. Encryption.
Apple and other tech companies want strong encryption to protect their customers. The FBI wants access to encrypted data to investigate serious crimes.
Encryption is a way to make digital information secure. It is meant to permit access only to those meant to receive a message or data.
But it can also prevent law officers from finding evidence of possible crimes.